A little bit of Christopher Hawthorne to soothe the soul. Welcome back, everybody. Episode 16. It is Friday, 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. sharp. It's actually 7:01, so not exactly sharp. You know, it's not dull, but it is, it's pretty sharp on a Friday. This is all stuff that we've read already. But last week, or Wednesday, not last week, Wednesday, we started part 3, The Onslaught of Islam. And we read through the very short chapter on the faith of Islam. He breaks down the section of Islam into 3 aspects: the Muslim faith, the Muslim conquests, and the Muslim cultures. The Muslim culture. Spoiler alert, I read ahead. He devotes as much, chapter space. He devotes as much time to Islamic culture as he does to these two put together. The chapters on the faith and the conquest are like 15, 20 pages long together, and that's about how long his chapter on the culture is. Because as we know, Islam is, the bastion of Eastern culture, right? Yeah, I'm really starting to find I don't like Moss. I really don't like this author. Because he's very subversive when it comes to Islam. Very submersive, because even when he's talking about the Islamic faith, he's like, well, that really wasn't the driving factor in why the conquest happened, why the Muslim invasions happened. It was actually economics. It was actually the economics, man. It was actually the economics behind it, man. You don't even understand. These Muslims, they were faithful, yeah, but that had nothing to do with why they wanted to burn everything to the ground, It's not why they wanted to conquer everything. It has nothing to do with ideology. It has nothing to do with the fact that Christianity and Islam are like water and oil. They're just two separate ideologies that cannot get along. Oil and water. And so, yeah, he devotes, 6 pages to the faith of Islam. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8.5 pages to the Islamic conquests. And then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and a half pages. 15 and a half. He devotes more. The chapter on is the culture of Islam is longer than both of these chapters put together. That's so subversive to me. What would you even call this type of person? Like a Islamic revisionist or something? I don't know, because his ideas about it are stupid. Like, it has nothing to do with ideology. It has everything to do with the economics, man. It's just economics. It's ridiculous. And it angers me. and we will illustrate a little bit better when he mentions Spain down here. And it will make you angry. At least I hope it does, because it's stupid. But we went through the Muslim faith, then we started talking about the conquests. And he starts off the first chapter of the section with stuff that I believe is correct. The Islamic religion is kind of a fusion between Judaism some Christian heresies and Zoroastrianism. That I do believe. I do believe that is the case. But it's definitely, but it's that, and then you get like some kind of, not demon worship, but you have a demonic influence because Muhammad gets these visions from an angel telling him that he needs to marry a 6-year-old. Great, great angel telling you to marry 6-year-olds, right? That's yeah. So there's something there. All of that mixed with the Arabian culture, the kind of, not pantheism. It's a kind of pantheism that they had. Not necessarily nature worship, but they had a lot of gods in Arabia. They worshipped a rock, and Islam kind of adopted that, the Kaaba. And so you have all that mixed together, and how is that not just ideologically opposed to the West and Christian civilization in every way? We spent, yeah, they're monotheistic, but they're monotheistic in a stupid way. Not necessarily, yeah. We'll go with that. Yeah, no, he's been getting on my nerves. Religion had When it comes to Islam, religion has nothing to do with the conquests. But when it comes to Christianity, there's no other reason for conquest than the spreading of your religion, right? I find it so subversive. But let's get to... Oh, we passed it up. But that's my preamble for today. That just annoys me. Everything about this section annoyed me because I thought we were going to get some actual comprehensive look into Islam and the rise of Islam and their conquests, and no, it's just, as the youngins would say, it's a nothing burger. It's like, oh, here's they attacked these places and they won. They attacked these places and they lost. And, economic circumstances caused them to attack this place. And, then they won. It's, yeah, Henry Moss. Classic subversive Englishman. At least I think he's English. Let's see. I don't really think there's much of a... He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. Yeah, I don't... Kind of hard to find where he's from. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, probably English. Yeah, he's an Englishman, so obviously he's going to be subversive because the English are terrible when it comes to history. I mean, even if you look at the good the good English historians like Hilaire Belloc, he's French. He's a Frenchman. Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton, is not a historian. He talks about history, but he's not a historian. But I do like Chesterton a lot. I like Chesterton. I like Tolkien. I like Belloc. But Belloc is a Frenchman. That it's such a French name. That's why he's an actual good historian, because the English are not allowed to be good historians, because they've been subverted. They've been subverted by a very particular group for a long time, since 1600s. You know, a specific banker group. You know. But that's yeah, England isn't allowed to be good historians. The French are great historians. All of my favorite historians are French. The Germans are very good historians as well, because they're very precise. A lot of the French a lot of the French authors I read quote a lot from German authors, which is unfortunate because none of those books are translated into English, so they are of no use to me. But maybe this book will be good as just kind of a bibliography, because I'm assuming he has. Let's see. Let me just remember. We're on page 185. Someone here. I'm typing it into chat so I don't forget. I think he should have a bibliography in here. I hope he does. If not, then this is just kind of a waste of time. Because that's probably all this book is good for. Because really, his commentary, everything he writes about, like, the book is good for just, here's what happened. But he doesn't really add anything to just, you know, a general history of, here's what happened. It's a chronological table. It's sideways, so that's pretty cool. Ah, bibliography. This will be worth looking at. I wonder if he... Gibbon. Gibbon's a very famous... The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Classic. Haven't read it. Haven't read any of it. Don't know really anything about it. Except that it covers the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Let's see. Yeah, German, French. This Pierre Boissonade. Oh, I have this book. Life and Work in Medieval Europe. I was thinking about reading this book next. History of the later Roman Empire, from the death of Theodosius to the death of Justinian, the constitution of the later Roman Empire. Cambridge Medieval History. Le Monde. The Making of Europe. I've looked into this book before. I think I have gone through this bibliography before. But you'll notice a lot of it is French or German. He probably spoke German, that's why it's a lot of German. But the Germans have a lot of historical work. They've done a lot of historical work in the past. Yeah, none of them I recognize. Atlases. Ah, here's more bibliography. Habit. Is this just general bibliography? And then he has specific ones for each era. Neat. Charlesworth. Yeah, none of them I recognize off the bat. I notice what's interesting here. Very few, if any, primary sources. Ah, never mind. I take that back. Gregory of Tours, History of the Franks. That's a good one. Yeah, no, this is where all of this section would be where most of the primary sources I know of would be. Gregory of Tours, History of the Franks. The other ones would be the Fourth Chronicle of Fredegar. There's the Historiae Liber Francorum. There's plenty of primary sources for the Frankish Empire, Charlemagne's time period, even the Merovingians. But I don't see much. I don't know if any of these are primary sources, but it doesn't seem like many of them are. Which, who was it that in the US that really helped get rid of the idea that you need primary sources? I'm blanking on his name. But he sold himself as like an economist or something. And he was really just I think he was an astronomer. No, I'm thinking of someone else. I don't know. I could find it real quick, but we should actually start reading. We're 15 minutes in and I haven't read a sentence. Yeah, I just wanted to complain about Moss. He's a problem. All right, so before we get into the other factor, let me just explain this real quick. What he's talking about here are the two factors that impeded the Islamic conquest in North Africa: Berber resistance and the struggles for the caliphate. The other factor, this first one he talks about, is the struggles for the caliphate, just for context. The other factor, which has been mentioned as an obstacle to the advance of Islam, was of less importance here than in the East. The struggles for the caliphate, however, delayed the consolidation of Egypt and thus hindered further progress. Further, the leader of a successful raid was always liable to arouse the jealousy of the caliph and was frequently recalled or superseded for this reason. The coast of the Pentapolis, which lay immediately to the west of Egypt, was secured as early as 642 in order to safeguard the left flank against Byzantine attacks. But not until 670. I need to get the whatever the 6-7 hand emoji. We should throw that in here. But not until 670 was the great camp founded at Kairouan in Tunisia as the base for extended operations in proconsular Africa. About 12 years later, a general rising of the Berbers, who still sided with the Byzantine cities, drove the invaders back upon the Pentapolis, and the final conquest of North Africa, which took place in the early years of the 8th century, was only accomplished when the Berbers of the Eurasian mountains had been subdued and conciliated, and the growth of Arab naval power had made possible a concerted attack upon the coast towns. And by subdued, he means crushed. Yeah, no, subdued is actually probably a good word for it. Because the Berbers kind of became one of their main fighting forces once they were forcibly added to the army. The Berbers, were part of the forces they sent into Spain. They were a local tribe in Morocco and Algeria, modern day Algeria, and they were the mountain ranges there on the border of the Sahara, the Eurasian mountains. But the Berber problem remained. The Berber problem. I love that sentence. I love that. Especially because it's a problem for Islam, and I don't like Islam. I don't know if y'all could tell, but I'm not the biggest fan of Muhammad and his lackeys. The Berbers, on the other hand, the Berbers are my goats. The Berbers are the best. I love the Berbers. Can we get a hashtag Berber in the chat? Hashtag Gerber. Subsidies were not enough to keep them loyal, and the conquest of Spain, which immediately followed, was due to the necessity of providing booty and occupation for the new allies. Yeah, definitely wasn't because they wanted to conquer Europe and turn it into an Islamic continent. It's definitely not because they were ideologically opposed to Christianity and they couldn't make any headway in taking Constantinople. It was probably partially due to that, but saying it was due to the necessity of providing booty, that's just kind of wrong. Because it was because they wanted to conquer and subjugate Spain and the rest of Europe. Spain was how they were going to get into Europe. Spain, Sicily, and southern Italy. These were all conquered around the same time. That was how they were going to conquer and subjugate Europe. Because they wanted, because it was a jihad. It was a holy war. They were going to conquer it for Allah. This was partially a cause, but it wasn't the cause. Islamic revisionism. That's what I'm going to start calling it. That's what it is. The attack on Spain, which took place in 711, appeared to have been at its inception one of those summer raids which throughout the Middle Ages descended upon the coasts and islands of southern Europe, carrying off women from the countryside and jeweled images from the plundered monasteries. But unexpected success awaited the invaders. In their march along the southern coast, they encountered and scattered the forces of the Visigoths, and a triumphal progress began. The unpopularity of the Goths and the treachery of the Jewish population, seeking to avenge their recent persecution, prepared the way. Not a lot of people will just straight up admit that the Jewish population of Spain betrayed the Visigoths. So, maybe maybe Moss isn't all that bad. In 2 months, Cordova had surrendered, and some weeks later, Toledo followed suit. The gates were opened by the Jewish population. Part of the persecution that he's talking about was there was a Visigothic king who had attempted to force conversions. He was stopped by Pope Gregory the Great, but Jews hold grudges. That's part of their belief system. So this invasion, it's really a three-pronged war. It's a two-pronged war, but you have Christianity on one side, and then you have Islam on the other, and then you have Jews inside Christian countries mostly helping Islam. Some of them help the Christians. But the Jewish populations tended to side more with Islam. They ideologically they were more aligned with the Islamic invasions and the Islamic ideas. And so the Jews and the Muslims worked better together than the Jews and the Christians did. Even though the Christians tried, Charlemagne was very cordial to the Jews, especially the merchants, because there wasn't a lot of merchant activity in the Frankish Empire, a lot of outside merchant activity. And so if most of it came from Jewish merchants. And so Charlemagne liked that, and he provided for them, gave them special rights. And the church itself has kind of, I could be wrong about this, but has kind of been very lenient with Jews throughout in Europe, especially in the beginning, like the first millennia, because our roots are the Jewish faith. They are the Old Testament. We're the New Testament. We are the continuation. We are the new covenant. We are the new version of the old faith. We're the continuation of the old Jewish faith. And so it's always been kind of the church's goal to bring the Jews into the fold. And the best way to do that, the best way to convert people is through charity. Now, if you're too charitable, you can be taken advantage of. Just remember that. And don't let yourself get taken advantage of. So the Visigothic kingdom, weakened by dynastic changes and internal dissension, collapsed like a house of cards. These swift and surprising successes of the Muslim forces were consolidated the next year. So, I'm pretty sure this isn't true. I'm pretty sure that it was just a mass invasion. It might have started that way as raids, and then they realized the Visigoths are kind of weak. Let's amass an army. And that might be what he's saying here. If so, that's what I understand it to have been. Let's see. These swift and surprising successes of the Muslim forces were consolidated the next year, when the governor of North Africa crossed over into Spain with reinforcements, and in a series of systematic operations drove the Gothic chivalry into the Asturias Mountains, and proclaimed from Toledo the sovereignty of the Caliph of Damascus. The advance continued across the Pyrenees, and in a few years the Arab Berber troops were in possession of the southern French coastline as far as Narbonne. From this center they were destined to harass the neighboring towns, Toulouse, Arles, Avignon, for the next 40 years. But the left horn of the encroaching crescent had neared its limit. Eudo, Duke of Aquitaine, stoutly defended the walls of Toulouse, and the culminating point was reached in the Great Battle of Tours or Poitiers, 732, in which Charles Martel, the Goat, decisively routed the Saracen forces. Charlemagne's grandfather, by the way, Martel means the hammer, which is just such a fantastic name. Charles the Hammer. I'm pretty sure Judas Maccabeus. I'm pretty sure that also means the hammer. There's several great figures from history whose nickname was the Hammer. Charles Martel being one of them. Charles the Hammer. This battle has become a symbol of the salvation of Western Christendom from the infidel terror, and its legendary fame is not unjustified. Okay, Moss, you gotta stop confusing me, man. Are you cool or are you not? Because you're terrible on Islam, but as soon as it comes to Jewish treachery and the Battle of Tours, you're spot on. Like, what's going on here? What's going on, man? Because there's several historians, some who I do respect, who are like, who do say, oh, the Battle of Tours was just kind of a skirmish. It didn't really have much of an effect. But that's just obviously not true. And Moss agrees with me. I don't agree with Moss. Moss agrees with me. I'm the one reading the book. He agrees with me. But in fact, the force of the invasion was spent, and it is doubtful whether any permanent conquest of southern France would have been possible. The Arab troops were by this time strongly diluted with Berber elements, and the antagonism between the two races, which was to show itself more clearly in Spain and Africa, had already appeared. The kingdom of the Asturias, moreover, in the northwest corner of Spain, the magnet of all the forces of resistance to the invaders, was daily growing in strength, and a barrier was thus being placed along the Pyrenees, preventing reinforcements from the south. Is he even going to mention the Battle of Covadonga? I don't know. Let's see. A far more formidable menace to European civilization was developing at the other end of the Mediterranean. No, he's not going to mention it. I agree with mentioning Tours. Tours is the more well-known one. But the reason the Kingdom of Asturias exists is because of 300 Spaniards in a cave. 300 Spaniards fight against, I think it was several thousand. It might have been upwards of 10,000 Moorish invaders, and the 300 knights win. Battle of Covadonga. Yeah, through an actual miracle, Our Lady appears during the battle, and the day is saved mainly through the intercession of Our Lady. Let's see. They don't have the army size. No. Not on here, at least. Let's see. Let's see. Wow. I love the disparity that they give. Traditional Christian accounts, 187,000 men, which is awesome. You know, I'm all for exaggerating. It was 187,000 men against 300, and the 300 win. That's a great story. I don't believe it. That would be awesome though. But the modern historical estimate was between 1,000 and 30,000 men. That's a large difference. That is a huge difference. It was between 1,000 and 30,000 men. Can you be a little bit more precise, please? But it was about 300 Spaniards against several thousand Islamic invaders in a cave. And due to divine intervention, Our Lady appearing at the battle, the Spanish won, and that became the nucleus of resistance. And that is where the Reconquista starts. It's not long after that the bones of, or it's 100 years or so after, that the bones of Saint James the Greater are found in Portugal. And the Reconquista starts in earnest under the patronage of Saint James the Moorslayer, as he would be later known. Oh, that is, normally I get upset when people text me during stream, but that is a text I love to see. Dad just texted me saying, I got some champagne. So, those kind of texts are always welcome. You can distract me as much as you like with that. By all means, distract away. Anyway, back to this mess. I would, as much as I love Charles Martel, I would argue that the Battle of Covadonga is more important of a battle than the Battle of Tours. And that is because the Battle of Tours prevents further incursion into France, but I do tend to agree that the Arab troops were, like he said, they were kind of slowing down. And they controlled a good part of South France anyway. Charlemagne reconquered all of that. But the Battle of Covadonga ensured there was a resistance in Spain itself. And I believe that to be much more important than preventing further incursion into France. Because even if they had taken Tours or Poitiers, Charlemagne would have taken it back anyway, or Pepin the Great would have taken it back Charlemagne's dad, Charles Martel's son. But it always kind of peeves me that they never mention Covadonga, because it's arguably the most important battle in the Reconquista, because it starts the Reconquista. Nothing happens without Covadonga. All right. A far more formidable menace to European civilization was developing at the other end of the Mediterranean. Byzantium was the real objective of Islam, and this right-wing thrust was all the more powerful since it came from the very heart of the new empire. In 642, the plundering bands were in Cappadocia, in 646 in Phrygia, and in 651 and 653 they penetrated Angora. In Armenia, the situation was even more serious. Between 646 and 666, a systematic occupation of the country was undertaken. In slow movements alternated with sudden rushes, the tide was creeping towards Byzantium. In 668, it had actually reached Chalcedon. Meanwhile, the Saracen sea power had steadily developed. Stealing out from the African ports, the corsair fleets ravaged Crete, Lycia, and the Aegean Islands, and Cyprus soon became an important naval base. As the fleets grew bolder, they pressed closer on the capital, and actions took place in the Hellespont itself. In 673, a determined assault by land and sea was made upon Constantinople, repulsed only by the utmost effort and the efficacy of the terrible Greek fire. Ancient napalm. You know that stuff they dropped on the Vietnamese? That, but just in ancient times. Not ancient, but the Byzantines. I don't know what it is more like. I think I've heard that Greek fire was very similar to what napalm is, but we don't know how to make Greek fire exactly like they did. But I think our fire is more effective. I think white phosphorus might be slightly more effective than Greek fire. A 20 years breathing space was granted to the hard-pressed Byzantines, owing to civil war in Islam, and for a moment Armenia was regained. But in 693 the forward march of the Arabs was resumed, and again the Bosphorus was threatened. Finally, in 717 came the Great Siege of Constantinople, and its heroic defense by Leo the Isaurian, whose brilliant progress set bounds for over 300 years to the progress of Islam. Footnote: the advance of Islam began again with the Seljuk Turks after the Battle of Manzikert. The Battle of Manzikert is basically what kicked off the First Crusade. Because the Battle of Manzikert gave basically the breadbasket of Constantinople over to the Seljuk Turks. That was conquered by them. And that caused the Emperor of Constantinople to have to call on the Pope for aid to help reconquer his territory. And the Emperor was expecting like a couple thousand men, just some people to help out. He wasn't expecting an entire army whose goal it was to reconquer Jerusalem. He got more than he expected. And then, in classic Greek fashion, they impeded and backstabbed the Crusaders every step of the way. And they did that for two more Crusades during the second and the third one. And then they got mad during the Fourth Crusade when the Crusaders said enough is enough and sacked Constantinople. Was it justified? Yeah, no, question mark. Were the people who did it excommunicated? Yes. Were they just told you can get the excommunication lifted at a local priest? Yes. Is the Fourth Crusade the reason thousands of relics were saved from Islam? Yes. Like, I'm not saying the Fourth Crusade was justified. I'm just, I'm also not saying it was a bad thing. Anyway, this may well rank as one of the decisive battles of history. When the discomforted invaders turned homewards after a year-long siege which had seen their transports burnt or captured, their troops numbed by the bitter weather or ravaged by plague and famine, they relinquished their last serious enterprise for many centuries against the capital of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. The Roman Empire is in the west. The reorganization carried out by the Isaurian rulers, which strengthened the internal resources of the Byzantine dominions, destroyed any possibility of concerted action on a similar scale. Henceforth, the naval operations in the eastern Mediterranean were limited to summer raids until the western Arabs, who had become possessed of Sicily and Crete, began to take a hand in the game. But it is the crowning glory of Byzantium to have stood alone against the full force of Islam. At the moment of its greatest strength and unity, the savior not only of the ancient imperial traditions, but of the future of medieval Europe. We are on chapter 10. I don't want to read this chapter because I can tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be this is Islamic culture. It's Arabian, and then everything else they stole and have claimed. Now, one thing Islam did do, they did preserve things because they saw what was good and what was advantageous to them. They did preserve it. I believe that Islam is one of the reasons we still have some of the old Greek philosophers' writings. But I think we also have a majority of them because of monks. I think that's where we have most of them, but I think some of those writings of the old Greek philosophers were preserved by Islam. Now, Islam does lay claim to algebra. Fun fact. They and all modern historians will tell you that the reason we have algebra is because Islam invented it. Persia invented it, and then they were conquered by Islam, and then Islam said, hey, we invented algebra. So I imagine it's going to be a lot of that. It's going to be a lot of, we were barbarians from Arabia, and we just kind of stole all of this culture from everybody else. We just adapted it to our own uses. Which is whatever. I mean, yeah. That's all this chapter is going to be. That's my prediction. But he apparently has a lot to say about it. He has more to say about this than he does about... He has more to say in this chapter than he does in the last two chapters combined. The majority of this section is on Muslim culture. So that's cool, I guess. Huh, it's raining. Who would have thought? Why wouldn't it be raining? Man, I really don't want to read this chapter. I guess we have to read a little bit of it. That way we can just finish it on Wednesday and be done with it. Yeah, we'll read a couple of pages. Where's the first section break? So far. Really isn't, but we'll do you red. Red to emphasize the pain I'm feeling reading this chapter, reading this section. At least next up is Charlemagne, which he's probably got some stupid thoughts on that too. I think I still really haven't we're getting pretty close to being done with this book. We have 2 sections left. I think after Islam we have 2 sections, or we might only just have 1 section left. Here, let me page 181. Using the chat as a bookmark. Yeah, Constantinople. Let's see, part 3, part 4. Okay, so this is the last. This is the last part. This is the last section. But there are just 5 chapters in this last section. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Hold on, how many? So we've 159 is the page in book that we're on. So we have 90 pages left or so. 80, 85 something pages. So, let's see, we're reading about 25 pages a week. So 2.5 weeks, maybe 3. Yeesh. Yeah, we probably about 3 weeks left, and then we're done with this book. I guess I need to start thinking about what we're reading next. I think we should do something super boring. I think we should. I've got plenty of really boring books on PDF. I'll look through my PDFs and just find one. We might not do this time period. I might try to find something a little later. More medieval history. Maybe something on the Crusades would be good. I don't know. We'll think about it. Well, anyway, I'm stalling. I'm stalling because I don't want to read this. But I started this, and I will see it to the end. All right. Chapter 10, The Culture. Muhammad had left no succession schemes, and his death removed the very mainspring of the movement. All had depended on him. The word of God issuing from the mouth of his prophet had been paramount. Fierce dissensions at once sprang up among his immediate followers, and simultaneously the Arabian tribes, still unreconciled to the supremacy of Medina, raised the standard of revolt, while in various parts of the peninsula arose rival prophets seeking to emulate the successes of Muhammad. As we have seen, the bloody Rida Wars, which induced Arabia to obedience, led directly to the foreign conquests of Islam. They had, however, another effect, namely the healing up of discord in face of the common peril among the factions of Medina. The venerable and respected Abu Bakr was chosen as caliph or successor of the Prophet, and was succeeded 2 years later by Omar, a political genius of the first rank, whose skillful direction of the Syrian campaign laid the foundation of the Muslim Empire. In 644, he fell by the hand of a Greek or Persian assassin, and Othman, a member of the Umayyad family, became caliph. The rivalries of Medina, however, still smoldered, and its autocratic power provoked opposition in many quarters. A movement of reaction against the central government started among the semi-nomadic troops of Kufa and Egypt, and was fostered in the name of religion by Othman's rivals. Obscure negotiations with the Muslims of Medina resulted in the murder of Othman by a party of troops from Egypt. Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law, who had probably been concerned with the movement, imprudently allowed the murderers to invest him with the caliphate, the other claimants having withdrawn to Mecca. Since these claimants were supported by Basra, it was natural that Ali should be favored by Kufa, the rival city, and the victory of Kufa over Basra secured him the temporary control of Iraq. Ali had now, however, to face the army of Muawiyah, governor of Syria. Excuse me. And though the first results were inconclusive, the balance of military strength and public opinion gradually turned in favor of Muawiyah. But before a decision could be reached, Ali had been assassinated early in 661 by the adherents of a third party. His son Hussein was proclaimed at Kufa, but abdicated in favor of Muawiyah a few months later. The fortunes of the Umayyad dynasty was to govern the empire until 750, were henceforward secure. I hate these names. They're just so stupid sounding. Hussein, Muawiyah. I had no clue how to pronounce it. Kufa. Like, it's just such stupid sounding names. Apart from the innovation of hereditary succession, apart from the innovation of hereditary succession, which it was no mean achievement to have imposed on the individualist Arabs, important changes now began to be made in the system of government. The capital was fixed at Damascus, and the old religious authority emanating from Medina was replaced by political control, which borrowed its machinery from the Byzantine administration. Early in the 8th century, the power of the Umayyads reached its zenith. The supremacy of Syria was assured, and powerful viceroys in other parts enforced the rulings of the Caliph. The attacks on Byzantium were renewed with increased vigor. In the west, Spain was added to the empire, while in the east, Muslim arms penetrated to the Punjab and far into Central Asia. A brilliant court flourished at Damascus, poetry and learning revived, and the Umayyad mosque in that city, together with the Mosque of Omar in Jerusalem, display the second flowering under the stimulus of Arab wealth of Byzantine architectural tradition. Yeah, because none of that existed under the Byzantines. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it didn't under the Byzantines, because I don't like the Byzantines. But it did exist. It definitely did exist, because as we learned a few chapters ago, there were Byzantine poets who were sent to be retainers to the Frankish kings. And the Byzantines weren't stupid either. I don't know, this poetry and learning revived as if it died. As if it was waiting for the embrace of Islam to finally be set free. The second flowering of Byzantine architectural tradition, which is just kind of, I'm not going to lie, it's kind of mid. Byzantine architecture, it's nice, but it's nothing compared to the French. You know, the Hagia Sophia is fantastic. But is it Notre Dame? Is it Chartres? I don't think so. Is it St. Mark's in Milan? At this point, however, a decline set in. The history of the last Umayyads is a succession of brief reigns, a series of intensive feuds, and outbreaks of revolt. Opposition to the dynasty arose from several sources. The old elective theocracy of Medina had never countenanced the ascendancy of the nationalist generals and statesmen of Syria, and continual intrigues in this quarter had to be encountered. Local feuds developed into a struggle between North Arabians and South Arabians, which spread throughout the whole empire. North and South, man. It's always between the North and the South. And the North is always in the right. You know, the Union, North Korea. I'm trying to think of more wars that involved North and South. I can't. I'm blanking. I will just say I am not immune to North Korean propaganda. Look, all I'm saying is I think a hug from the supreme leader of North Korea could fix me. Any problems I'm having, all it would take to fix it is just an embrace from Kim Jong Un before he straps me to an artillery piece and blows me to pieces. But it would fix me for those few moments. Africa and Spain, no less than Iraq and Khorasan, were torn by dissension, and even within the Umayyad house, echoes of the dispute were heard, producing as a result palace murders and dethronements. The most formidable enemies of the regime, however, were the Shiites, members of the Shia, or party, of Ali, whose headquarters lay in Iraq. And they are still in Iraq, by the way. The Shiite Muslims are the main Muslims in Iraq, I believe. And they're kind of used as a proxy force for Iran, for the Persians, which I think are also Shiite. I could be wrong about that, though. I'm still trying to familiarize myself with all the different current factions in the Middle East. Because, big part of what's going on there right now is the Iranian proxy network. That's one of the big holdups right now. Because they're a threat to Israel, so Israel works to dismantle them. But there's a lot of proxies. There's the Houthis. The Houthis are south or east. You have Hezbollah, who's in southern Lebanon to the north. You have Hamas, who's in Gaza. You have the Palestinian Jihad group, which is in the West Bank. You have the Houthis. You have the Shiites in Iraq. And they are all supplied by Iran, which is why Israel has been trying to dismantle all of them, because Iran is the biggest threat to Israel in the Middle East. And that's why they're at war. And that's why we're involved. Because we do what Israel tells us to. Yeah, proxies. Shiites, they're still there. All of these people are still there and they're not going anywhere. During the brief caliphate of Ali, Kufa had been the capital of the empire, and the memory of those golden days still remained to sharpen the resentment felt against the more civilized and powerful Syrians. Gradually, the movement took on the emotional colors of a religious cult. Ali and his son Hussein, who had fallen in the cause of the Kufa people, were venerated as saints. They were the martyrs of Islam, the son-in-law and grandson of the Prophet himself, and the depositaries of the true faith. Their descendants, or certain of them, this point gave rise to further discord, were the only rightful heirs to the caliphate. But it was not from Iraq that the revolution was destined to take its birth. Though Persia as a whole had proved itself loyal to the Umayyads in the time of their ascendancy, and still remained after their downfall more faithful to their memory than any province outside of Syria, its northeastern parts were the scene of a Shiite outbreak which changed the whole face of the Mohammedan world. Beginning in Khorasan, a great anti-Syrian movement swept westwards, supported by the South Arabians and dominated by Persian influence, whose nominee, Abul Abbas, such a ridiculous name, founder of the Abbasid dynasty, was proclaimed caliph as As-Safa, the shedder of blood, and proceeded forthwith to justify his name. Just the stupidest sounding names. One by one, the members of the Umayyad house were hunted down. The only survivor fled westwards into Spain, where he succeeded in gaining the supreme power. Meanwhile, the ashes of former Umayyads were thrown to the winds, their palaces and aqueducts ruthlessly demolished. A new age was to begin. Such was the watchword of the conquerors. All right. They were right. The Abbasid victory marks the transformation of the Muslim Empire, as will be seen later in connection with the administrative and social spheres. From now on, the Arab conqueror yields up his exclusive position. The growth of converts, the exigencies of government and trade, the superior numbers and civilization of the conquered peoples have done their work. Islam is no longer the religion of the Arabian overlords. It is becoming the force that binds together Muslims of all races. And the representative of that force is the Caliph. He is no longer, as in Umayyad times, the director of schemes of conquest and exploitation by an imperial race. In spite of the increase in system and complexity of the administrative machinery, the provinces of the Muslim Empire successively free themselves from the political control of the central power while remaining loyal to its religious authority. Spain was the first to go. In 756, Abdal-Rahman, last Umayyad survivor, was proclaimed emir and governed as an independent prince. Africa was not slow to follow suit. In 788, Idris bin Abdallah, a descendant of Ali, founded in Morocco a similar emirate, that of the Idrisites, with Fez as its capital. Here too the religious authority of the Caliph was not questioned, but in practice the ruler was independent. A more important emirate was centered at Kairouan in Tunisia. Ibrahim ibn Aghlaba, Ibrahim ibn Aghlab, about 800, laid the foundations of the Aghlabite dynasty, whose naval power dominated the central Mediterranean through the 9th century. These Muslim names are going to be the death of me. The conquest of Sicily, steadily pursued, was accomplished in 902. South Italy was continually ravaged, and in 846 Rome itself was the scene of one of their daring exploits. By 870, Malta was in their hands, the key to Western commerce, while the cities of the Adriatic were constantly at the mercy of their raiding corsairs. Not till the coming of the Normans in the latter half of the 11th century were the Saracens driven back to Africa. All my homies love the Normans. Danish Vikings who become French, who conquer Sicily. Like, what's not to love? Egypt, however, was not finally withdrawn from the Abbasid authority until the Fatimid conquest of 969, when the revenues which had formerly drained into the coffers of Baghdad were diverted to provide for the adornment of Cairo, which became, during the following centuries, one of the most brilliant capitals of the Muslim world. One by one, the provinces in East and West assumed independence, and by the 10th century AD, the Muslim Empire had ceased to be a political unity. But a unity of another sort, equally significant if less material, pervaded throughout its borders. Not for nothing was it that the same call to prayer sounded at the same hour from the minarets of Cordova, Kairouan, Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad, that all eyes turned daily towards Mecca, and all hearts aspired to go thither on pilgrimage, to worship their rock, to worship their ugly black rock. And to this community of faith was added community of language, for Arabic was in every country the vehicle of religion and sound learning. The prestige and splendor of Baghdad were manifested by the widespread imitation of its government, customs, and architecture, and the immense and unbroken flow of commerce extending by land and sea from farthest Asia to the Atlantic, enclosed the varied peoples of Islam in the meshes of an opulent and many-sided civilization. All right. I refuse to read any more Muslim names tonight because I hate them. I don't hate the Muslims. The religion I do. The Muslims themselves I'm not allowed to hate. I pray for them. The names, though, I hate Muslim names. They're so stupid sounding. Can you just be named like John or Lawrence or Henry? No, it's Ibrahim al-Abgahar Balid. Like what? Anyway, we're stopping here. Yeah, that's going to be it for me. I have nothing more to comment. This chapter has been painful, but it's been fun. It's been good. It's been good. Um, yeah, that'll do it for me. Um, yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. You know, and Kim Jong Un, if you can hear me, please save me. Kim Jong Un, if you're hearing this, I need a hug, man. I'm I I need a hug. I need to hug my supreme leader. I mean, he looks like a big teddy bear, but he's also ruthless. But he's a ruthless teddy bear, and I want to give Kim Jong Un a big old hug. I got to get my hair cut like his. That flat top. I got to get that flat top. Anyway, y'all have a good one. Y'all have a good night. And I will see you all on Wednesday.